The inspiration for the garden at Hampton Court this year has come from a lady called Eileen Gray, who was an Irish designer who moved to Paris in the 1920s, and she had her own furniture shop, and she also did a bit of architectural design, and the chairs are a Bendham chair designed by her, plus the table on my left. She also designed a house in the south of France, and the pavilion here is modelled on the style of that pavilion. A lot of the architecture of the modernist movement then was cubist, and in a way we've tried to replicate that by planting and using different squares and different rectangles. So, for example, all the herbs are all planted in cubes, and each cube then is filled with a different herb but planted or raised to a different level. So in a way, coming from Ireland, it's like the Giant's Causeway, where every square is at a different height. The planting in the garden is inspired by the type of planting in the south of France, where the colours are very soft and subtle in blues, greys. We've drifts of agapanthus and salvias. It's done in different levels as well, so as you pan through the garden there are levels from right to left and also from top to bottom. So as the garden has different aspects and different angles and different views. One of the plants that figures heavily in the garden here is agapanthus, and we have 2 or 3 different varieties, and Tom Thumb is a particularly nice one because it's quite a small agapanthus. In stature, as the gardens get smaller, it's more in proportion, but it's a plant that nearly thrives on neglect if you're a busy person and you can't get to do the work. If it's in a pot where it's really kept very tight, or if they're in a border where they're planted tight together, they really do prefer that. They like to get nice and dry and the roots to be tight. The sponsor, Vestra Wealth, have been very conscious of how the garden should look. It had to look sophisticated, and yet it had to have a good atmosphere as well, and it should be practical. And if it isn't used, then you won't go out and you won't maintain it. And if you enjoy it, you will. So it should have little areas where you can sit down and have a glass of wine and have small vistas. Even if the vistas are only 4 or 5 meters long, you will then get the feel of the garden and you'll be able to use the garden. And then when visitors come to your garden, they may be inspired by what you've created. The garden here is 15 metres by 11 metres, and it's typical of a small garden, maybe a little bit bigger than an average suburban garden, but there are pieces in the garden that you could have at home. You don't necessarily have to have a large water feature. We have water tanks here, and there's a fall space in them, so the water itself is only 3 or 4 inches deep, so they're quite safe to have for children. The herb pots are all cubes, and again, it's a manageable area. If you want to gain more area, you just get another few cubes and plant them up with different vegetables. But it should look quite smart, and also it should carry on from the interior design outside. So we're assuming that this pavilion is the inside, and then those materials that are used inside then flow outside into the garden itself. That way you can make a smaller space seem larger. We have 5 senses, and we should use the sense of even noise as regards movement with grasses and bamboos, and then scent with lavenders and herbs. And it's great to be able to know the different seasons when the garden changes. If a garden's too sterile and only box and only hedging, then you don't know the difference between January and June. So I think this is a great way of knowing the different seasons and getting a feel for a garden and then getting out and doing it. In terms of clients, what I think is a way that should be thought of a wee bit more perhaps is, although the building or the extension to the house that you have may have a modern angle, or it may be modernist in the way this pavilion is, the hard landscaping would normally be modern to match. So, for example, the paving inside would then match the paving outside. But it doesn't mean that the planting outside has to be as modern. We've used more old-fashioned plants like lavenders and grasses, just to calm and give that soft effect and soft atmosphere.